Hey, it's Kate with the CMO Show, and I'm super excited to have my guest today, ML. She is the CMO of a really cool IT company. And what's very special about her is how her adventurous take on childhood informs her adventurous take on marketing. She's an extremely calming presence, I find, and I'm really grateful to have spent time with her. And I hope you'll enjoy our conversation. And I am super excited for my guest, which is ML Carvalho. She is the lovely CMO of a company called Portnox, and we're going to talk about what that means because it means something. And I'm really excited to have her here with me. Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. Before we get into the juicy stuff, can you pronounce for the audience your actual name because it's so pretty, and from my perspective it relates a little bit to some of your story.
Yes, Marie-Laure is my name, but usually I go by ML. It's a lot easier, especially in the workplace.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful name. I wanted to take the time to appreciate that on air, and also to ask you about where you grew up, because we were talking a little before we went live about it, and I think it's really cool how part of your story has informed the way you approach marketing.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in France. My parents are actually immigrants from Portugal, and I'll touch upon how we've come back full circle. And so I was raised there, went to the education system, got the opportunity to come to the U.S. at some point, but we moved all over the place when I was growing up. When I'm asked where I'm from, I always say Paris, but I really lived there. I was a transplant, right? I really lived there like the last few years of my student life, through high school and college, and then came to the U.S. after a few years in college to finish my studies and go to graduate school. So that's funny that, when I say I'm from Paris, I'm really not born there.
Paris and all the surrounding areas.
But it's definitely my favorite city when I'm asked where I prefer going. I'm totally biased, of course, but I'll say Paris for sure.
I love Paris too. I lived in London for 3 years. People always ask me what was the best part about living in London, and I always say Paris. It's like
the food is better. Oh no, there's a lot of great restaurant now.
Yeah, such a magical place.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being here, and I'm curious. I was listening to you talk about how you grew up, and we ask a question of our guests before you join about what do you think is the most important quality in a CMO, and you said being adventurous, and yes. I'm thinking, wait a second. Of course, right? Like it's literally in your DNA and ingrained in your childhood experiences, it sounds like. So can you share with our listeners how you think about being adventurous as a CMO? What does that mean to you, and how do you apply that trait in your day-to-day work?
Yes. What I'll do it for myself and I'll do it for my team. I really push them to try things. But put it in a way where they can sell it to a business, where, they're not risking all their budget on, one campaign that's like some crazy thing. But, I try to be always 10 steps ahead of where we are today. Mm-hmm. And even early in my career I was, and being adventurous was one of the things that I took advantage of. What's the next big thing? I'm never satisfied of where we are today. Mm-hmm. And, I'll touch upon, in some of your question probably about that, but it is about trying new things, and think of your career, and not just for marketing, but their own career, their own. I take risk on hiring sometimes because I'm not maybe in a position to pay top-notch dollars at this startup, or so who is the right profile? Like, how do I analyze? How do I deconstruct this to find the right characteristics? And everybody tries that at some point in their career, but taking a bet on something. It seems risky, but in the end, it pays off. It's the most satisfying thing that you can experience in your career. So I try to keep that in mind, even as I grow up as a leader and I have to deliver like bigger and bigger goals. In the back of my mind as to where do I want to go from here? Like what steps can I go that are just right at the edge of making my CEO comfortable, but being sort of uncomfortable in the unknown is what I try to do.
Yeah, so we're supposed to find ML if we have a really high appetite for feeling like we're standing on the edge of a cliff, but we're not going to fall off.
Yes. My whole career has been that. I came from a background that's not typical. I was an engineer by education to start with. I worked in the oil and gas industry, and then one day I decided I want to go into marketing. How do I get there? And I went into business. I went back to school, and to me it was to achieve a career change. So it may not have been. Maybe I would have found some other way to do it that would be more economically viable without getting into, paying for business school. But that was what America gave me. To be honest, I think my family thought I was crazy to go back to school when I was 30.
Yeah.
And
well, that's adventurous on its own, right?
It is. And, go back to living in a one-bedroom apartment and going to school, on a bike and just living the student life for a few years. So, it's you have to be open to these things. And I think my background is definitely what prepared me for that. My family just came, they had nothing. And every generation was better off than the prior one, and the pride I see and I saw in my dad when I went to engineering school and then I went to America. So to me, this is what drives me. So being adventurous is something that it's not typical maybe into the answers you got, but it definitely in the fabric of how I was raised and been living my life.
Yeah. Well, what I love about what I get to do here with you and others is find the links between who we really are at the core. And sometimes that's how we grew up.
Yes.
And how that relates to who we are in our profession. And I think it's just such an interesting thing to think about and talk about.
Right.
Because those aren't the things that are on resumes or on LinkedIn. Right. But they're really
not.
Real.
They're not explained that way in a sense. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's very powerful. Well, tell me what's the biggest risk you feel like you've taken that's served you really well in your work, let's say?
In my work, well, I have bet on very atypical people to just start their career in marketing. You have to be invested in them, though. They just can't figure it out on their own in general. I have bet some of my budget on things, hoping they would work, right? So these are the role of a CMO in my mind. These are the things we need to do. It's so competitive out there. Like, how do you? And you hear sometimes that, the star CMOs that you hear, they've done XYZ at this unicorn, and that's how they've grown. And it was something different at the time. But to me, these are the big hits that get talked about a lot. But CMOs can have in their career a lot of smaller hits that with actually what I prefer doing. Like, because although I'm adventurous, I want to spread the risk across a lot of things.
You're diversifying your adventure.
I have a very pragmatic approach to all of that. And so how do you build a career where you maybe haven't had one big hit campaign or one big hit decision, but it is a lot of smaller things, and it just come to life. You realize after the fact that this is all these connections together that have made a success for your career, for your work, for your team, for the business. And this is, I call it marketing nirvana. So to me, it's more satisfying that the big high of the big hit campaign. And suddenly you are at a startup and you start a podcast and it's a hit. Everybody listens to it, and your awareness just goes through the roof, and you don't even need to spend $1 now anymore. and to me, it's more, how do I have dozens of those in a year that are more sustainable? And if one fails, I still have 11
Yes.
to go with. So because not everybody will have this big hit. Like I say, it's like a hit song versus, the musician or artist who has a sustainable career having, a smaller audience, but very dedicated audience, sustaining them, and who has diversified their revenue stream and things like that. So this is how I see it. I have musicians at home, so that's how it's up on me to compare my career to that.
Oh, that's nice. Again, the context of your home informing how you think of making marketing plans.
That's right.
Which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
And our environment affects us in many ways.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So tell me what you think you can learn from other people. Do you find that you look to the marketing community for ideas about adventurous risks, or to round out other parts about yourself that you feel are less developed? How do you think about looking to people in the community for advice or inspiration?
Yeah, I always do, and especially if they're not in my field. I did a stint in B2C early in my career, and then I switched to B2B, and it was a source of inspiration for me. So I always go back to how do they do it, in this context. For example, there are things, when I think of something I want to get better at, or I want my team to get better at, or my first thought is, who does it the best? Regardless of where they are. It could be in sports. It could be in, wherever it is. Who does it best, and what it is in that context that makes them successful? And how do you apply that in your context? And I write it down, and then maybe one day I'll get the idea. And sometimes I can figure it out today. But I do love to have this moment of reflecting on it. And that's also one of the dangers of the career of a CMO, is not having enough time to think.
Yes.
Because we are in that race, and there isn't enough people on the team, and there isn't enough time, and we have to be involved in the minutious detail of the day-to-day. And then we lose focus. We lose focus on what the future might be.
Yes.
And so I try to have those moments anytime. It could be, for me, they could come on the weekend, they could come in the evening. So I write them down. And just something on a piece of paper to remind me later what I was trying to figure out. And I may come back later. Yeah. I may not even see the note, but because I wrote it down, I remember it's there.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, there's something interesting and counterintuitive about the idea of adventure and risk, and then being reflective.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. It can be challenging as a marketer to create the space to be reflective. And really, if you use the adventure analogy that you gave, before you go on an adventure, there's a certain level of preparedness that's required, right? What are you going to pack? Are you going to have the right gear, right? And so I think that's a really powerful metaphor for marketers to hold on to and reflect on, right? Is taking risk, even if they're micro risks, but being prepared, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So what would you say your biggest superpower is as a CMO?
We're being asked this all the time in interviews nowadays.
Yeah.
I used to always say, because it was a differentiator, that really data is my superpower, because I came from more an engineering background. But I think to me now is everybody needs to know data.
Yes, so it's table stakes now.
It is. If you don't have it, it's really hard. Unless it's a particular role where really it's about the brand. And, so those exist out there. But in the B2B space I am, in software SaaS, in SaaS, right? it's grounding. And from day one, you have to establish the system. You have to know what's going on in your funnel.
Yes.
And if you're uncomfortable with data, even if you're a brand person or product marketing person, to me, that's the basis of everything. The depth in which I go into it maybe is atypical because I go crazy with data, definitely. And I actually enjoy it very much. This is my happy place. So
a lot of adventure going on in those spreadsheets.
A lot of adventure in the spreadsheets, yes. Excel's my favorite.
Yes.
This is where I go first. And I pride myself to have made a lot of businesses very predictable. And this is a place that every business wants to be at. Whether it's going well or not, you want to know and not be surprised. Now I say more as I matured my career. I've been doing this for 20 years. And it's more around, I've realized how I stretch myself between being able to talk to the CFO and now learning about the boards and how, what they care about. And being also enough in the day-to-day to that if I have a team that's, well run, then I can step back a bit and manage across. If they're not, I can step in. And having this breadth, has always served me really well. Whether I was a manager, director, VP, every level I've tried to just manage up in a way that they could tell the story to their own boss, make them look good, or tell the story, what's really understandable about what the data is saying. How is dimension? Is it healthy? What's your point of view? And being able to condense that in a digestible form for, not every one of my bosses were comfortable with data as much as I was. So how do I make them comfortable so they do look great in front of a board? And and now I am in front of a board, and so I try to understand what makes them tick. What are they going to care about? Should I just skip these things and just show the data and just say they're not going to care about the operational stuff, but how can I talk about it in a way? It's still a work in progress for me. I think I've been a CMO for over a year, and I enjoy it, just this challenge, to be honest. And so to me, if I ask me a superpower and you say, is there a superhero you can compare yourself with? Maybe it is Mr. Fantastic. He can stretch himself,
That's a fun one.
So maybe it is that. And so, and it is more of a behind-the-scenes superpower, which is not, flashy or anything, but I think it is important to be able to connect the dots.
Yes.
So I think that's been a dot across my career that I'm starting to think about as something that has happened.
Nice, Mr. Fantastic.
Mr. Fantastic.
So how about share with CMOs out there, or really anybody who is dealing with boards, how have you gone about being curious and learning what you think they do need so that you can deliver that? Because I think when you're first in your role, it's like, okay, wait, this is the first time I've done this kind of a thing, putting a board presentation together, presenting, like, how did you learn into that? What might you share with our listeners about that?
Well, you talked about the community. I don't think I've addressed that. I do enjoy a few of them, very few. Those are super helpful. They are human in nature to me, like where it's okay to share a personal file that you have created that could be helpful to someone who is at a startup that's in Series A phase. Yes. And you say, that was useful for me at the time. There are things that I've shared that are old because you don't have to reinvent everything, and you realize that what I was using for when I did some consulting with somebody years ago, it's still a template that can be used today. And so why not just helping them? So it's a give and take. You get out of the communities usually what you put in. And so if you are somebody who is always asking for help and not giving it, at some point you're not going to get much out of it. That well is going to dry out. So I think to keep it healthy, you have to constantly share ideas.
Yes.
And you'll get something in return. So I think there's such a tough job that being supportive amongst each other. Yeah, we are competing against ourselves sometimes to fight for the same job. And I've interviewed for a job and then I've seen, this guy now is in this role. But I'm proud of them. Like, in a way, it's like they were probably a better fit than I get. And I'm more pragmatic when interview. I'm more realist of, am I the right profile for you? Because if not, I'm out of that race. I don't want to push to convince you that I can do this job if you are not really looking for someone, or you're not in a stage in your business that you need this from me, which is the best talent I have to offer. You should hire someone with a different profile. And I have gone through an interview where that has happened multiple times. Like, you're a startup, you're a Series A, you're in seed phase, and I shouldn't be your first hire. Maybe it's somebody who is more of a go-to-market professional, more rounded product marketer. I can build the systems behind that when that happens. Just find your market fit, find where you go, and then I will build the machine, is more where I fit. And so realizing that fairly early in my career also, what I can do and what I can't. It's not that I'm stretched myself. I do PR now, and I'm not from that, side of the marketing.
Yes.
And I like it. And to be honest, I learn a lot every day about things that I haven't based my career on. I know to be a well-rounded CMO, you need to be able to do these things. Do they scare me? Not at all. I actually, being adventurous,
because you're adventurous
into it.
Yeah.
Oh yes. I'm not scared. I know my limits, but I'll push them anyway.
Yeah.
And so this has served me well. And so that's why, the community has helped for me to get prepared for the next board meeting. Whether it's just moral support, whether it's just encouragement you're looking for, you can do it, right? Because, but I have a supportive CEO. I have a great leadership team with me, and we knew what we wanted to show. But sometimes, hearing from your peers are even more meaningful.
Yes.
And hearing in a different context also help to me internalize that my situation is not unique in a sense, but my situation is also different. So I have to figure out, how different it is and how can I make the most out of that from what I've learned.
I appreciate you sharing that. I think there is a really important trend that's come up a couple times on this show about really the art of matchmaking when it comes to CMOs and CEOs. And what I'm hearing you validate is that that's been important for you.
That's important.
Yeah.
Where I am today is because of the leaders I have, I work with. And we don't, sometimes CEOs just don't know what they want in a marketer.
Right.
And that's where they make mistakes. And we can say marketers the tenure is very short.
Yes.
And it is not always the fault of the marketer. It is sometimes, did you have the right person in this role at the time of the growth of of the company? Maybe that CMO would have been great at a different time. Maybe you're looking at someone who is too much like yourself.
Yeah.
And so there is some of that too, for sure.
So I'm hearing you say your philosophy on marketing is like a little bit like love. Yes. Timing is everything, and matchmaking is really important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
that's
ML marketing is like love.
Yes.
That's my key takeaway right now. It's like an acronym. ML is an acronym for that.
We can.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think that's really powerful, and I connect with that a lot.
Yeah. It is. I came from the hard science of marketing, but why I didn't stay in engineering to me is like that other side of the brain that wasn't connecting with me. I don't think I would have stayed in a career. I would have tried to grow into something different, even if I would use my engineering skills. So I'm not a pure geek, although I claim that I'm a geek, even as, because I sell to geeks, it's very intuitive to me.
Yeah, tell us about that. So Portnox, what's it mean? you're targeting people in the IT profession, but share a little bit of those.
You know, Portnox is very, something very familiar to network engineers, and that's who we sell to. But also, I'm in the cybersecurity business, so it was a genius idea to call this company Portnox this way because of Fort Knox, of course, and we're in cybersecurity, and it always starts with, a little reaction from the name. So I think to me as a marketer it's great because you don't think it sucks. It could be sometimes how do you spell it? That's the only thing that's a little tough if you're not in this business. But it's something we can overcome. My name is hard to spell and I always manage. So, it's fine. But just the idea of Portnox and Fort Knox and, how a little bit of a pun it is. I like it. So when I came on board as a CMO, like changing the name wasn't even on the radar. I wasn't going to do it. It's like, this is great. I don't need to mark my signature onto this because someone else thought about it. It's absolutely not what I wanted to focus on because it was already great. So I'm like, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, good. Who came up with the name?
Well, the founders.
Yeah. See, that's cool.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Everyone can be creative.
Yes.
Well, and it's brilliant understanding of the audience and thinking of something colloquial.
Yep. Exactly.
That's really powerful. And it's like, just because it doesn't mean anything to me as a non-IT human.
No, you're not the audience.
Like, it's perfect for
our audience. It's perfect.
Yeah. And that's like, it took me a while when I first started in B2B to get comfortable with the fact that my friends had no idea about what I was doing. And then I was like, you know what? Actually, if you don't understand what I'm doing, that's actually good. Because
you're not the target audience.
You're not my target audience. So like, I'm sorry that you don't get it, but I'm glad.
That's right.
And I am just going to just keep on trucking along. Right? But like, I started in consumer packaged goods where everyone understands. So that took a little getting comfy with.
That's right.
So tell me then, ML, what do you think has been the biggest flop of your career?
Wow.
Adventurous, I'm thinking adventure, risk taker.
Yeah.
There has to be some sort of flop in there.
I have failed a lot.
Even though you're magical.
Things that I've tried. I don't know if there were big flops because I was always ready for them.
Yeah, that's okay.
I think some of the things that I think I waited too long to do, probably as more things I haven't done rather than the things I've done, because I hope everybody has failed in doing something or making career choices or to me the biggest flop is doing the same thing over and over, hoping it's going to change, and that never happens. And so this is how I approach failure. I know it's a little cliche because, not everybody talks about it, but it's always have seen it like, get yourself together. It's okay.
Absolutely.
That's how I was raised. I was never in a family where it's like you fail at something and then you're going to get, therapy for 6 months. It's like the next day it's okay, get over it. It's fine.
No dwelling needed here.
No dwelling needed. So that's sort of our approach flops. But put budgets in and really you don't get the demand you hope, and then you have to justify it. There's been a lot of that. As long as you have more successes than failures, you keep moving. So I've had flops like that. But again, some of the things that sometimes are regrets that I have that are the biggest flop to me. It's like, maybe I should have done this earlier in my career. Like at some point in my career, I was, really worried. I was here on a visa, like losing my job was my biggest stress, right? And
that's understandable.
And I've learned to you know what? I'm not going to let this rule my life. I'm going to do something about it. First of all, not worry about it for now, but I'll be prepared. If that happens, or I'll have a plan. And sometimes being prepared is like you can't change the course of things. And that has freed me from thinking about it. And I know it's a luxury I have because I can find a job any day. I'm educated, and it's not. I'm extremely thankful for the the path I've taken and the successes I've had. But I think there's, at a smaller scale, everybody can, have this attitude and not let some of these just dominate their life in a way. Mm-hmm. And it's hard. So a flop has been like, why didn't I do this earlier? Like, I would have been less worried about certain things.
Yeah.
You and I were talking about, you don't look stressed. Like, I internalize things quite a bit, and I don't show it, right? And even though I'm very expressive and like I'm very direct in my communication, like I'll tell it like it is, but there are things that are personal to me that I will keep inside. Mm-hmm. And so, opening up to your team about some things has been something that I wouldn't do it early in my career. And then it's liberating to have them just empathize with you and share this experience about what is worrying you as a leader and things like that. So, that there are little things that, I've learned along the way that I wish I had done. Maybe the course of things would have been different.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it because I personally have been thinking a lot lately about how we can build on things that occur, right? Like use the things that happen, whether they feel good or they feel bad, but use the things that occur in our lives and our work to move forward, right?
That's
in a
right.
way that feels like it's responding to like gratitude for something that occurred, right? That you learn. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm curious, before we go, if you can share maybe your favorite book and also a tool that you think every marketer should use or a quality you think everyone should have. And these can be personal and professional. Either is good.
A good
Mr.
question.
Fantastic.
A book that is not new, that had a big impact on me years ago, is The Laws of Simplicity by John Maida. He worked at Apple, and they had, fairly breakthrough approach to design.
Yes.
And I know it's design. It has not, but I explained earlier, like, how can I get learnings from other areas that I can apply to my own career, my own life? And to me, this book was suggested to me in some passing conversation by someone else I knew and a colleague of mine. And I grabbed it. It's a tiny book, but I reread this book many, many times over the years, because when I'm in a certain place, I'm like, let me think again about what should I do with this website, or what do I do to clean up my life? Like, what's the approach? Like, let's be reminded what works. And it's not always the same part of the book that helps me, but somehow it's so simple, and it's really just, I do like the way it was written in these little chapters, and I can go wherever chapter I think might be most useful. But I always have this book lying around and suggest it to everybody that asks me, like, what should I read? And so it's one of those I go back a lot. So that's why I want to mention it. Yeah.
That's good. So it's like a book and also a sort of a toolkit. Yeah. Awesome.
A tool for my day-to-day or my work. To be honest, like, I've recently got into Notion, and I just love it.
What is Notion?
It's like a project management tool, and I try to manage my life and my work around it. You have to build it up, though. And so to me, it's like a life project. And so you get, the more you put into it, the more you get from it. It's one of these that's very customizable, and it integrates with a lot of things, your calendars, your notes. You can create so many different variety of pages. Like, if you start in this rat hole of just going on YouTube of like all the tricks and and tips you can learn from, using Notion,
Yeah.
you can. So I don't make my team use it. They use like a project management tool like Trello, or right now it's Trello. I use Asana, things like that. To me as a marketer, it's one of the most critical second tool to have. It's just like when you have more than 2 people on the team, like how do you manage projects?
Yes.
And this is one of the things we put effort on this year in terms of we've grown the team. We tripled the size. We went from 2 to 6, right? It's not a big number. But you realize there's already friction.
Absolutely.
And lack of communication about what's getting done, who is next to do what. And so, yes, we needed a tool like that. So it seems like trivial, but not everybody thinks about it early on in the stage of a startup. And a good CMO will know that that's needed right away. But I think it's one of the most useful things that can make your team super productive.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of my weaknesses is project management. So
here you go.
Notion it is. Well, thank you so much for sharing some time with us today. I really am so grateful to have met you and to have understood more of your story. And it's one that I think a lot of people can benefit from. So
You're
really
welcome.
Appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Bye.